It's Alabama State versus Jackson State. JSU is looking to clinch the SWAC. Meanwhile, Alabama State is looking to keep their hopes alive. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, Sam Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives for as long as we're there, because they're doing some weird things at the place they call X. But as long as we're there, at South Exclusives starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com. And if you're new to FanDuel, you can get $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a winning $5 bet. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. This is the game that I've honestly been waiting for all year. It's the game that I was extremely excited about. And frankly, I think it was the game I always anticipated being the SWAC East decider. I know that I had Alabama State at number one, and I wasn't sold on FAMU, wasn't sure what to exactly expect from Jackson State. So it was probably some sort of compilation between Bama State versus FAMU, Bama State versus Jackson State. But this is the game that I've been waiting for a little bit of time now. Alabama State versus Jackson State is always a great game. We will give you the key to victory for each squad at the end of the episode. In segment 2, we'll look at two storylines. And I don't really think that storylines are the biggest thing here. You have the most obvious aspect, which is Jackson State and their ability to win the SWAC this weekend. But we kick it off with the matchups, man. I think a lot of this, there's no drama here. There is no story that keeps it coming. This is an action movie. Right? You ever watched an action movie and you're sitting here like, there's not really a plot. Perfect. I was watching this anime Bakihama, right? I think it was just Baki at the time, actually. I didn't get to Bakihama. I wasn't able to continue it, but you don't really care about my watching habits. You care more so, why would I compare Alabama State and Jackson State to an anime named Baki? The reason I compared it to that is, to me, Baki didn't have no plot. It was straight action. That's all they did. They met up in random places and just fought. They didn't plan to meet. They just fought. They just got it in. And that's what this feels like to me. We've seen some action movies like that, where it's just action, 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 action. But because that's what we're anticipating, we're okay with that. Everything doesn't need to have this huge plot or these bunch of plot points around it. That's kind of how I look at Alabama State versus Jackson State. The storylines ain't as interesting as they typically are. Instead, this is just straight action. So enough with the prologue. Let's get into the matchups. And it kicks off with Irv Mulligan. I know that Irv Mulligan versus the Alabama State run defense is the main event. It's the main attraction. But guess what? This is not UFC 309. I'm not John Jones, and this isn't about Steve Miocic. So we're not going to wait until the end of the show to get to the main event. We're going to get it started right now. This is more like a rap verse where you put the first verse is the one between that and the ending. The first verse can be the one that kicks it off. You're like, oh, this is the hardest verse. This is what I'm looking at. Irv Mulligan versus the Alabama State run defense, because technically this Hornet defense is the second best run defense in the SWAC. By yardage, they are the second best run defense in the SWAC. The thing that does it for me, though, is I have seen some tackling issues, and that concerns me. I saw it in week 1 against North Carolina Central, Jamari Taylor. Now, you may be able to say, well, that's Jamari Taylor. That's a fantastic back. And after week 1, we didn't really see it that much. And you know what? I would agree with both of your points, but I would push back on both of those points as well. I was the one who came in and gave them a bevy of excuses. I gave Alabama State a bunch of excuses. Hey, it's week one, whatever. I don't even know exactly what I said, but I did not think that this was going to continue happening, right? Because I think some people may have seen this and said, I don't know if Alabama State is going to be that great of a defense this year. They really did struggle in a variety of ways. I understand that. Me personally, I said, I think they're going to get their tackling together. I know they have great coaching on that side of the ball, so they're going to get that together. And I haven't really seen it much, but I did see it recently, and that scared me a little bit. I saw some poor tackling against Grambling. I can't remember if I saw it the week prior, but I'm pretty sure I saw it against Grambling. And I was like, this feels like week one again. So to see it just last week has me a little bit on edge for that defense. The second aspect of it is you can say, well, that's Jamari Taylor, but this is Irv Mulligan. You can say Jamari Taylor is I would say second now, but one of the players in the conversation for MEAC Player of the Year. I would say that Irv Mulligan is the conversation for SWAC Offensive Player of the Year. The comparison between players is there. The comparison between teams, two powerhouse schools, it's there, guys. So I don't know if I can just be like, well, that was Jamari Taylor. It's a certain, basically, it's a certain class that these things happen against. You're going against that class now. That's the way that I look at it. It's the main event. We're going to spend the majority of the time talking about this. We're going to spend the majority of the time talking about matchups. Storylines will probably be our shortest segment just because it's not as much to go off of and so much to dive into. But Irv Mulligan had a really good first year at Jackson State. He's blowing 2023 out of the water. And I think that this is a perfect time to compare Irv Mulligan 2023 to Irv Mulligan 2024, just to show you how dynamic of a player that he's been since returning from injury. Mind you, he missed the end of last year with injury and the beginning of this year with injury, which means he's played 8 games in both of these seasons. Let's look at the stats and compare them. 122 carries to 121 this year. So we're looking at a very similar workload, basically the same. That is important so that you don't think anything's kind of slanted. He's gotten basically the same workload through 8 games. 5 touchdowns last year, 8 touchdowns this year. 5.5 yards per carry last year, 7.4 this year. He's already 200 yards higher than his last year's total. So you're looking at stat for stat, what are we talking about? More yards per carry, more touchdowns, 200 more yards on 1 less carry. You go through the last 4 games for Irv Mulligan, and it's basically a season worth of yardage and touchdowns, especially when you compare it to last year. He had 139 yards versus FAMU, 171 versus Bethune-Cookman, 141 versus UAPB, 187 against Mississippi Valley State. Y'all hearing this? There's nothing below 130. 139 versus FAMU, 171 versus Bethune-Cookman, 141 versus UAPB, 187 versus Mississippi Valley State just last week. This is the last 4 games. He's had 638 yards and 5 touchdowns this year. That's basically last year's stat line with 4 less games. He's averaging 7.4. He is blowing his own season out of the water from last year. This is your SWAC Offensive Player of the Year. I think I've said that every single week for the last 3 weeks, and I'll continue saying it. And if Jackson State wins this game, it's over. It's over. Like, you can put the trophy in his hand right now. It's over. Because they're going to win the SWAC, at least the SWAC East, and I don't think the SWAC Championship even factors in, but you're going to win the SWAC. He's going to be the driving force of that. Could you be surprised to see how much Jackson State throws the ball with TC Taylor, knowing he's a passing type of guy? Here's the one thing I'll say. In this 4-game stretch, he's faced doo-doo passing defense or running defenses. FAMU 8th, Bethune-Cookman 11th, UAPB 10th, Mississippi Valley State 12th. Like, it's been bad. They have not faced good run defenses at all. This one is a step up. Alabama State is number 2. Now to James Burgess and Caleb Offord versus that Jackson State wide receiving core, because originally it was just James Burgess because he's been playing so out of his mind. He has the stats to back it up. I think Caleb Offord has been playing better than the stats would suggest because you're looking at interceptions and things of that nature. But look, Caleb Offord has been a dog on one side of the field. James Burgess has been a dog on the other side of the field. And it's very difficult to attack the perimeters for Alabama State. I see a lot of, and the reason I was going to just isolate James Burgess too is because I see people not even look his way. It feels like I never see James Burgess until he's coming up to make a tackle. He's been a very sure tackler this year, or he's catching an interception. That feels like the only times that I see James Burgess. Typically, people stay away from him. Offord sees a little bit more attention, but I notice it's not much. It's not a lot of attention. That's one thing that I did notice. So it's a lot of attacking down the seams or stretching the field and hoping to get towards the safeties. That's what it feels like people are doing against Alabama State in order to try to have success, right? They're still a very talented secondary. For Jackson State, the first guy that I think about is Fortillion. But he and Isaiah Spencer have pretty much the same amount of yards. They're separated by less than 50, right? They have same amount of catches. So they're sharing the workload very well, in my opinion. But Fortillion has 7 touchdowns, and that's what sets him apart. He's second in the conference in receiving touchdowns. That's the thing that makes you think of him first, because not only is he going to rack up a bunch of yards, not only is he going to be the most popular or tied for the most popular receiving target, he's also going to give you touchdowns. And it feels like he's always making a big play. So I would love to see Fortillion, and he does stretch the field. I would like to see how much cover 2 that they play, how much man they play, right? Like, I would like to see how deep they're going to have their cornerbacks face Jackson State, because I know JSU is going to try to stretch the field, and I don't know if I want to have my cornerbacks overly shallow. I don't know if I want to do that this game, just because I know what kind of offense that I'm facing. Then the last one that I'm taking a look at is Treqwan Thomas versus Joshua Nobles. And this matchup is between the 2 leading sack artists in the conference. I don't know if they're going to be the defensive player of the year. It'll be interesting if they can get to 11 and a half, 12 or so sacks, because at the end of the day, we all know sacks are the most valuable defensive stat when you're comparing these type of things. So with that being the case, I'm looking at Jackson State's Joshua Nobles, who leads the conference with 9, and I'm looking at Treqwan Thomas from Alabama State, who has 8.5. They have different type of rushes, or I should say sack performances. I wouldn't even say rushes. I don't want to break down the everything. For the record, for the defensive player of the year, right now I have Andrew Jones, but these guys are right there behind them, and with the right amount of sacks, they could be the DPOY. But with Nobles, a.k.a. the club, as I like to call him, he's been very productive and consistent. He's only had 1 game with 2 or more sacks. He's only had 1 other game with 1.5 sacks. So you're not looking at him having 3-4 sacks in a game. But what you do see is he's only not had a sack in 3 matchups. So he's very consistent. He's very productive. You know that he's going to be able to rush the passer. That's consistency, and I can appreciate that, right? Treqwan Thomas has had the same type of consistency as well. He only hasn't had a sack in 4 games. Mind you, one of those matchups, he got kicked out in the first half against Bethune-Cookman. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that it was kicked out due to targeting. That was on a sack. So had it not been targeting, he would have had a sack in that game too. So there's a lot of consistency in both of these pass rushers. Where they differ is that Treqwan Thomas loads up on sacks. I don't know how he hasn't caught them, but he loads up on sacks. I guess that 1 game really does make a difference. And Jackson State's played 1 more game than Alabama State. So I think that kind of plays with the numbers a little bit. But against Miles, he had 3 sacks. Against Sanford, he had half a sack, right? Against FAMU, he had 2 sacks. And against Mississippi Valley State, he had 2 sacks in that game. So you're looking at overall 1, 2, 3 of his games where he had sacks, he had multi-sacks. 2, 2, and 3. This guy is a beast, man. Like, this is going to be phenomenal. And what's interesting is these are the 2 teams that get the most sacks in the SWAC, but at the same time, Jackson State allows the least. Alabama State allows the 3rd least. Alabama State don't throw the ball at all. They throw the ball. Jackson State is 3rd to last, and they still got them beat by like 60 passing attempts, something like that. Let me see. Passing attempts. Jackson State has thrown the ball 237 yards. Alabama State is throwing it 170. So it's still almost a 70 attempt gap, and Jackson State is near the bottom of the league. The next closest team is Texas Southern, and they're at 187. So that gap between 10 and 11 is pretty wide. But anywho, let's get into the storylines. We've gotten to the meat and potatoes of it all. Let's get into some of the parsley before we get into the key to victory. I didn't even throw the parsley on right. I just, whatever. But no, here goes the parsley, and that is the storylines, because there are some intriguing things to look at. And I want to do that briefly as we wrap up, or excuse me, continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. And back in the day, Peyton Manning used to always scream, Omaha, Omaha. That was his word for we're calling an audible. If he ever had Omaha Steaks, the only time he'd be screaming that is when he's saying, can we get some more? There is no audibling when you get to Omaha Steaks, because I promise you, once you have it one time, there's no, I want to go here, I want to go here. No, it's Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled taste and quality of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50%. You hear me? I'm talking about savings now. Save 50% on gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. Yes, that's 50% off plus $30 off plus a $30 rewards card. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more. Save 50% off site-wide. omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE and an extra $30 reward card when you shop early. That's OMAHA steaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football. We're getting into the college football playoff season. You need to know what's going on. It's getting crazy out there, right? So you need to go ahead and check out Locked On College Football to make sure that you're up to date with all of that. For the storylines, it's simple for Jackson State. Win and you're in. There's SWAC East implications in this matchup, but all of that goes out the window if Jackson State is able to win. Who told the SWAC to schedule all their games at 2 o'clock back-to-back weeks? They have one game that's not. They have one game that's not, and they have one game Thursday night. So I guess let me stop complaining. Last week was bad. I seen multiple 2 o'clock games, and I almost pooped my pants, man. Like, I was so upset. I ain't gonna lie to you. When are you in for Jackson State? I was going to say that you don't know who's going to be in first, Jackson State or Southern, but we have a chance to know exactly what the SWAC championship game will look like by the end of Saturday. By the end of Saturday, we could very well know that. So, but it's when you're in if you're Jackson State. It's not difficult. For Alabama State, you keeping your hopes alive with a victory, and you're hoping that Alcorn can come up with the win, and then we'll see what happens from there. The simplest way for you is to just go ahead and win these next two games, FAMU lose a game, and Jackson State lose in the finale. But you see how many words I had to say? You see how many complicated? That's complicated, and that's the simplest way. The complicated or the simplest way is still complicated. For Jackson State, that's not the case. You come in here, you handle business. You are perceived to be the better team. You are definitely the favorite. If you come in and you do what you're supposed to do, then you will be the SWAC East champions and headed into, as a matter of fact, I think you would even have the tiebreaker over Southern. So you'd be hosting a SWAC championship for the third time in 4 years. Just took a year off. This is incredible, man. I think year two of TC Taylor, it's working dividends. It's working dividends or paying dividends for Jackson State. I think they made the right call. I know I'm late to that, right? Anywho, the other one is this is the biggest game of Kareem Key's career. Kareem Key's career as a head coach or as a quarterback. He's not a head coach. That's Eddie Robinson Jr. But as a quarterback for Alabama State, it doesn't get bigger than this. There will not be a bigger game unless they're able to get to the SWAC championship. But what concerns me is that last week he struggled. He wasn't as consistent. That last fumble against Grambling felt a little nervous. That last fumble against Grambling felt like I'm a little, and I know Grambling's great at forcing turnovers. I want to give credit to Grambling because that was actually a pretty good strip. But at the same time, you got to handle that ball better. And I feel like he had been in previous weeks. So there was a little bit of disappointment as far as what Kareem Key was able to do this past weekend against the Grambling Tigers. I want to see if he can play better. I want to see if he can retain that accuracy and that consistency, right? He was 14 to 20 the 2 weeks before. He dropped down to about 50-something, 57% completion from 70% completion, yeah, if Kareem Key plays like he played last week, it's not going to be close. That's the thing. And it's not like he played terribly. He put him in position to still tie that game and go into OT. But I think Jackson State is a much better team than Grambling. And I think that they're going to put up more points than Grambling. Or they have the possibility. They have the ability to put up more points than Grambling. And I know that Grambling lost to that. I mean, they beat that team, but I don't know, man. This is a different squad. It's a different Irv Mulligan. I don't know. Right? I just think that Jackson State is still the better team. And it was so long ago. Anywho, for Kareem Key, you got to perform better. I don't know if the running backs are going to help you. There's no Holtzclaw. If Holtzclaw was here, I'd be feeling different. I'll be putting the pressure on him. But he's not. And Kinsey hasn't shown me much lately, right? Like the running game in general hasn't shown you much lately. And Kinsey is kind of fading to the background as far as the amount of carries that he gets. Gates came back last week. You're looking at God, they had 4 running backs, and I'm forgetting the one that got the most carries. Marcus Harris. So you're looking at, there's some running backs there, but you got to get some more production out of them. They have to run the ball better this week and help Kareem Key. But let's get into the keys to victory. Wow. That's a missed opportunity. Let's get into the Kareem keys to victory as we continue with Locked On HBCU. From Omaha Steaks, Omaha to the NFL, Omaha. You ever had a bet? You're like, I know this is going to happen. Then you happen, and it doesn't happen. And then it happens, and it doesn't happen the way you thought it was going to. And you like, man, I wish I could Omaha. That's okay. Listen, matter of fact, go to FanDuel.com right now. It's the NFL season, and with your winnings, you can go to Omaha Steaks. It all works together, 50% off, $30. You're good. You're going to win some and still be able to pay. Or excuse me, you're going to win some and still have some left over from what you got paid out. You just got to go to FanDuel.com. NFL, NBA, it's in full effect. The Pistons, Detroit, basketball. Word to my guy, Trap, man. So you're looking at a lot of great things going on in sports. You are. The Commanders versus the Eagles was last night. I hope you made some money on that. But if you didn't go to FanDuel, it's not too late. Go to FanDuel.com. Get $150 back in bonus bets if you're new to FanDuel and your first $5 bet wins. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. The key to victory, it sounds simple. It sounds simple for both, but I don't think that it necessarily is. I'll start off with Jackson State. You got to finish drives. I've seen this with Alabama State. Alabama State is an aggressive defense. So they're going to give up some plays. It's going to happen occasionally, right? But at the same time, they tend to bounce back. Big plays for Alabama State tend to go to like the 50-yard line, the 40-yard line, and then they buckle down. If you're Jackson State, if you get a big play, you have to go score. Because I do believe that Alabama State understands the situation that they're stepping into. They've gone through more than a handful of quarterbacks this year, and they're going against Jackson State, the team that's undefeated in conference play. They have 2 losses. They don't have anything to lose. They're probably going to be itching to make a play, but they also know that people are counting them out. So with people counting them out, every time that you get a big play and you don't go score, that defense is just, the confidence is going. The chest is pumping out. Like, this is what we're looking at with Alabama State, is a team that just needs a reason. Confidence is there, but confidence can waver. If you just allow them to stack up big plays, you allow them to have their back against the wall and it work out, the confidence is going to grow because it's waiting to jump out of them. You can see it when you watch the secondary. That secondary has confidence for days. They have confidence to spread to the rest of the team. But that defense as a unit, and I'm kind of getting into my second point, which is my Alabama State key to victory, so I'll fall back a little bit. But that defense has the ability to make this a much closer game than you would want it to be. Jackson State has to finish drives. If they get a big play, you need to score, preferably a touchdown, right? Like, that's how you should be operating it. Jackson State has a great offense, the best scoring offense in the SWAC. They can put up points. I expect them to put up some points. It's about how many are you going to put up. They're also second in yards. But if Alabama State can win that red zone, I'll say even the 30-yard line, right? If they can win that last 30-yard line, that last 30 yards, Alabama State wins that last 30 yards, and now they're kicking field goals. Or maybe they're getting out of field goal range because of sacks and things that nature. We just talked about Treqwan Thomas. You know that he can wreck a game. If Alabama State wins that last 30 yards, now it's field goals. And now it's 2-3 scoring drives. That's 9 points. Just need a touchdown and a field goal to top that. Like those are things where it's okay. You don't have your offense in too much of a hole, which for me is the key to victory for Alabama State. Alabama State's defense has to be great. This is Kareem Key's biggest game of his career. The running game is not what I would like it to be if I was a Hornet. The defense has to be great. This is your bread and butter. Jackson State puts points on the board. They have to put up 7, not 3. Alabama State plays defense. You got to be tight. I would try to limit those big plays. But at the end of the day, you are who you are. So you're going to gamble, right? You're going to gamble. You're going to give up some things. You just have to make sure that you're not giving up 60, 70-yard touchdowns because you've shown the ability, like I just spoke about, to hunker down, to stop them when they do get into your territory or when they do get a big play, whether that's near the 50 or past the 50. Alabama State has shown the ability to say, no, it stops now. We took this risk, but now it's over. I don't even know if I want that. You might just have to be locked down. I know they're looking to put points on the board. Trust me, no one has told me this, but it is a fact. Alabama State's defense is looking to score a touchdown against Jackson State. They are. So they're going to take their risk. They're going to take their gambles. You have to make them pay if you're Jackson State. And when you make them pay, you may have to take it all the way. But either way, I need more touchdowns than field goals out of you. For Alabama State, I need lockdown defense. I need most drives them to not even cross the 50. That's what I think you need because these teams are going to be aggressive. If you cross the 50, you're going to see some fourth downs that you go for it. It's just a matter of what kind of game are you expecting. I'm expecting a great one. This is a much different game of the week than I feel like we've done. I was able to speak from a different place. I was able to speak with a different intensity and honestly, a different attention to detail because that beginning part, that first segment, that was much longer than the first segment ever is. But I needed to give you everything. Treqwan Thomas versus Joshua Nobles. 2 elite pass rushers in the SWAC going toe-to-toe. Who can wreck the game more? James Burgess and Caleb Offord versus those Jackson State wide receivers. Can they get loose on the perimeter, or are we going to see a primarily seam-to-seam passing game? We'll see. But the main event of it all, it may have went first, but it gets spoken about last. I use that rap verse analogy. The first and last verse are the best on the posse cuts. And we started it off, and we're going to end it with Irv Mulligan on a 4-game stretch that is providing a season worth of statistics for other players going against the second best run defense in the conference. Can they shore up their tackling? Because if they can't, Irv Mulligan is going to run through those arm tackles. Ooh, I can't wait for this game. In the meantime, in between time, I'll be back here on Monday to probably break down this twice. You get 2 fingers here. You get 2 pointers this time because that's how geeked I am. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.